And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Ryan Metzler.
Hey everybody, it's Ryan Metzler here again, and today we're going to take a look at a 4X game, kind of in the vein of things like Eclipse. We're going to take a look at Hegemonic from Minion Games. Now this is a game for 2 to 6 players in which each player will be vying for control of sectors of the galaxy using industrial, political, and military power, whichever ones they find to be most advantageous to them at the time. Each one of these powers will work in a different way, and there are several different strategies you can utilize in order to try and gain control of the board. Before I get too much into it, why don't we just take a look at what you get inside this box. We'll see how the game plays, and then we'll come back here at the end and we'll get my opinions of it. So here you can see one player's board for the game of Hegemonic. Now this is going to be a game where I'm not going to be able to cover all of the intricacies of gameplay. There's far too much going on to cover all of it. So I'm going to try and give you a quick overview of what the game's about and how it plays. But each player is going to have one of these boards. On this board you can see storage spaces for your industrial complexes, which are a type of building you'll be able to build. You're going to have political embassies, which are these circular buildings, and you're going to have martial outposts, which are the triangular buildings. These are going to be things that you can use in different types of warfare. You can have industrial versus industrial, or industrial versus political, or industrial versus martial, and all of the possible combinations there when you have warfare with other players. Now you're going to be trying to place these out onto space quadrants, or space octagons, I guess they technically are. They're not quadrants because there's not 4 of them, but there's going to be these little octagons that are out on these different galaxy boards, and you'll have these kind of laid out in a way that makes a pattern based on how many players you have. You're going to start the game with 1 military, 1 political, and 1 industrial out on the board. And what this does is it gives you different stats at the start of the game. Well, each player will have the same stats, but it gives you your starting game stats. You'll see on this track that you have numbers 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 along the top here, or 3 through 10 here, 4 through 10 there. These numbers combined, when you look at the lowest empty circle you have, or square, or triangle, are going to give you your income. So right now my income is 2, 5, 9. This will always happen at the start of the round, and you will get caps. Now caps are going to be money in the game, and they look like this. You'll see we have 5 caps, and we have some 1 caps here. So at the beginning of the game, in the first income phase, I would get 9 caps. There are also some really nice caps that have been made by Minion Games here. They have this, or they had this Kickstarter that came out. These are metal. And they're painted really nicely. So these are going to be available soon. They go with this game, and you can use them for pretty much any game you'd like, but they're really awesome. They have a great feel to them. You know, they're nice and heavy. You can get some of those if you want. I have the 1 to show you. Unfortunately, I don't have any more. In addition to the income that's kind of figured out by how many of these buildings you placed, you're going to have your cost to build these buildings below them. So the first one of each costs 2, 4, or 3. But as you build up, the next industrial will also cost you 2, the next political will cost 4 or 3, but the more you build, the more expensive they'll get. In addition, in each one of these, you'll see the circle, the square, and the triangle, not in that order because I pointed at them wrong, have infinite symbols here. That's how much money you can carry over from turn to turn. But if I take off the next industrial, we'll see that I can only carry over 10, and the number you can carry over is always the lowest of these numbers. So these are all 10, but the further up you go, now it's 8 that I can carry over from turn to turn, and it'll go down and down the more stuff you build, which is kind of a limiting factor in the game. In addition, each player is going to have fleets here. You'll see you have 3 fleets that you can build onto the board, and you're also going to have agents. The amount of buildings you build is going to dictate the costs for some of these things, or the power of them. So the more of these political buildings you've built, you'll see their abilities up here. If you're in Tier 1, which is having any of these 3 buildings remaining, they cost you 2 to play. Tier 2 will only cost you 1, and Tier 3 they'll become free to play out onto the board. You have a similar effect for the fleets here, except for that they get more powerful with the more military buildings you build. So in Tier 1 they have a power of 1, Tier 2 they have a power of 2, and Tier 3 they have a power of 3. The industrial actually doesn't really correspond to a figure, but more to gates that you can build, which are going to allow you to teleport from one region to another. At the beginning, they have a range of 2, so you can place them 2 away from one another and then teleport between them. But at Tier 2, they have a range of 3, and at Tier 3, they have a range of 4. So, depending on where you want to focus, you can either travel further, or you can use political power more efficiently, or you can have a more militaristic type of combat. In addition, each player is going to start with their own action cards, and these action cards are many and varied. They do different things. For example, this one is Assault, which will allow you to essentially use your industrial power to either attack the blue or red, which is going to be the political or the martial. Or you can use a Move an Agent, which is political, and then sabotage either a yellow or a red. Or you can move one of your fleets and hit a yellow or a blue. Now, when you play this card, you actually get to take 2 actions, and there's the real ones at the top, which are called Destroy, which destroys the type of building that you're attacking on here. And they have a cost, which is the movement cost. We'll cover that in a little bit later. +1 times the power of whatever you're attacking. And power will fluctuate based on how well your opponent's built up their political or their industrial or their martial complexes. In addition, you can take the basic action at the bottom here. And the basic action will let you either gain 2 money, or you can draw a tech card that you've already played. You could have them played to your advanced tech areas, or you could draw one from the basic deck, or you could just pick one back up that you already had. Whatever the case may be, you can kind of move them around using this basic action. So, you can either take one of these and one of these, or 2 of these actions, however you want to split it up. The different cards do different things. So for example, this one is Industrialize, which will let you build your yellow complexes, and then you could also use it to attack somebody else's yellow with your yellow. And it has the same basic action at the bottom. You also have Martialize, which is the same thing for your military complexes as I just described with the industrial. Or you have Politicize, which is the same thing with the blue, the political. Then you have things like Subvert. Now, Subvert is going to be a little bit different. This is not simply destroying your opponent's complexes, this is replacing them with your own. So you can use yellow to attack blue or red, and then replace whatever you destroy with your own stuff from your board, which kind of is a little bit better than, of course, just simply destroying their stuff. When you get to number 4, you have Discover, and there are 3 different actions on here. One of them will let you collect caps equal to your lowest cap gain amongst your player board, so it's just another way to get some income. And you can find the lowest one on here and gain that many caps, so right now it would be 2 caps. Otherwise, you can Survey, which is to go and add another tile to the board. Or you can use Research, which is going to let you return any of your inactive tech cards, which are tech cards you placed down here, which you've used for warfare, basically, to your hand, and then redraw up to a limit of 5. So you can pick them up, discard, and draw back up. And those are all of your options for cards. So you're going to be choosing one of these each turn. Actually, you'll choose 3, but you'll choose one each action round to take those actions, and that's how you're going to advance in the game. Each of these action cards also has a number at the top left. You'll see this one is number 1, whereas this one is number 2, as are the other ones with it. There's a 3 and a 4. When you play these cards, they're going to activate in order. So Assault will always come before Industrialize, which will come at the same time as Martialize or Politicize, and then Subversion and Discovery in that order. So if you want to act before somebody, you may need to play Assault. Hopefully you can hit them before they hit you. But if it's not as important, maybe you want to Industrialize instead of Assault. Also, you may want to attack yellow with yellow, as opposed to attacking yellow to red or blue. So choosing which one of these cards you want to use and how you want to use it is going to be very important. In addition, or finally, each player is going to have a hand of tech cards that they're going to start with. These are called advanced tech cards, and they have different tiers on them. For example, this one here is a Tier 1 industrial tech. In order to build a tech, you're going to have to be in that tier for the appropriate type of power. So right now we're Tier 1 in industrial, political, and martial. So we could play a Tier 1 industrial tech if we wanted to. This is going to happen during a phase where you're doing expansion, and you can play these cards out to make yourself better and have different abilities. But of course they have costs to play. For example, a Tier 1 costs 1. Here it tells you what the ability of it is. So it says if one of your gates is about to be destroyed, you may pay $1 per individual gate and relocate it to another position. So this is going to let you move your gates around. It gives you a little bit more industrial power. There are going to be other ones. This one's a Tier 3 military, which is going to give you, of course, more military power or a different military power. But we also have Tier 2 militaries, which increases the power of your fleet by 1. So you can use these for different reasons. You can choose which ones to play, but note that you have to be the right tier or have the previous tier's card already out in order to play one of these cards to the table. In addition, at the bottom of the cards, you'll see values for the different powers. So we have 4 industrial, 6 political, and 2 military. When you're in a combat, you can play one of these cards to modify your strength in that combat and hopefully have a little bit of a secret aspect to the combat that allows you to overtake your opponent. And you can play these carefully, putting them in your inactive tech areas and picking them back up later so that you can hopefully reuse them. So here you can see the board of Hegemonic all set up for a 4-player game. As I mentioned earlier, each player will have their own starting sector that will have 1 industrial, 1 political, and 1 military complex already built on it, giving everyone the similar starting scenario. In addition, each player will be dealt 2 tiles at the start of the game. You can see these tiles here that can be moved. They'll be placed on these galaxy sectors out here. But when you get it, you'll be dealt 2, and you'll choose one of them in order to place adjacent to your starting sector. So our red player here has chosen this one that can hold 2 military complexes. You can see there's 2 triangles here, and 1 political. Our yellow player has chosen a tile that can hold 3 military, so they're kind of going to try and build up military, it seems. The green player has chosen 2 industrial and 1 military, and the purple player has chosen to build theirs off away from everybody else with 3 industrial in this area. So everybody's set up for the start of the game, and the game is going to take place over rounds which are divided into 6 phases. There's going to be an arbiter, and that arbiter is going to lead all of the phases and make all tie-breaking choices. So let's say that green is our arbiter at the start of the game. First thing that's going to happen is collection, and players are going to get their income. I already described how this happens, but it's based on how many buildings you've placed on the board. After that, we're going to move on to expansion, and expansion is divided into several steps. The first step is that the player who is currently the arbiter is going to draw a tile from this tile stack here, and this tile stack is essentially a timer for the game. Once the tile stack is gone, you're going to head and end the game at the end of that round. But they're going to flip this tile over, and they're going to place it over here in this area. So the player is going to place the tile. Now they get to choose any one of these tiles to add to the board wherever they would like. So maybe they've decided they really like this tile right here. They're going to try and build up their industrial power, and they're going to place it over here. Now, everybody else is going to take that step, so why don't I cut right now, just advance it so everybody else has taken that step, and we'll continue with the next step of the expansion phase. Now that everyone has done their first step of expansion, they've placed a tile out here. This actually wouldn't happen in this order. One player would do all of their steps of expansion, then the next player would, but for ease of use, I want to show that everybody has placed a tile. But after you place your tile, you're actually going to draw a card from this stack, or you can draw a card that you've already placed, or you can draw a card from the discard pile. And these are going to be your technology cards. So basically, green would have placed their tile, then they would have drawn one of these cards. And these are the cards I showed you earlier. So this is a tier 1. I already showed you this exact same card. And they could choose to play a tier 1 to their board because it's the first turn, and it would cost them $1. So they could play this to their board, and all of their gates, when they got attacked or destroyed, could be relocated for money. So they're going to play this out to their board. It would go above their board in one of their 3 active advanced tech slots. They'd have that ability until they either removed that card or lost it somehow. But essentially, that's going to be an ability they have for the rest of the game, unless they choose not to. Every other player, after they'd place their tile, would do this same thing. So they can draw the discard cards if somebody didn't want it, or they could place a card that they already had in their hand, or they could place one or pick one up from their own area, whatever the case may be. But everyone would go through this step, and then we would advance on to the action phases. Once we're done with the expansion phase, of course, we've moved on to the action phases, and there are 3 action phases that follow every expansion phase. This means that you're going to play 3 of these cards, one after the other, after you've taken all of the actions. Each player is going to choose one of these cards, the 2, the 3, the 4s, or the 1s. They're going to choose them in secret, depending on what actions they want to take. They'll place it face down in front of them, and once everyone has picked one, they're going to reveal them. When they do this, you're going to activate them in order, so 1s before 2s, 2s before 3s, 3s before 4s, and so forth and so on. If there is a tie, the arbiter always decides who gets to go first in that tie. That does not mean that they go first. It means that if they're in the tie, they can choose the other player to go first, especially if it's to their benefit to see what they've done. But I'm going to give an example of a couple of actions. We'll kind of skip around here, but the first action I want to show is industrialize, or any one of the building actions. It could be martialize or politicize, but I'm going to show you industrialize. So let's say I'm the green player and I've chosen this action, and I'm actually first to act because I'm the arbiter and no one chose 1. I have the options of taking either the build complexes and gates actions, or the takeover action, or the basic action. So let's go ahead and say that I'm going to take the build complexes and gates action. I have 9 money currently. So I would look at my board and see how much they cost. My board's over here. You'll have to take my word for the cost, but the first one is 2, the second one is 2, the third one is 2. You get the idea. I can build as many of these as I want, so long as I'm in range and I have the money. So the range of a card is going to be printed right here on the complex. You'll see next to these complexes, it might be hard to see, but the range of industrial complexes, which is this little hex number, is 1, and that will always be the range of an industrial complex. So anything that's within 1 space is going to be within my range. For example, this is within 1 space, this is within 1 space, that's within 1 space. All of those are within 1, so I could build as many as I wanted to as long as I have money. Let's say that I wanted to build 4. 4 of these would cost me, turns out, $3, $6, $9. It's going to cost me $9 to build 4. So I can build 1 here, I can build 1 here. From this point, I could, if I wanted to, build onto here, because these are now within 1 range of those. So I could build 1 here and 1 here. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to build the last 2 over here, and that gives me presents on all of those and costs me $9. So that concludes my first action with this card, but I get 2 actions. I no longer have any money, so I can't really build anything more, not to mention I would have done all of my building at once anyway, but what I could do is just use the basic action at the bottom, which is to take 2 money and add it to my supply, which is what I'll do. Let's say that everybody else chose a similar type of building action. They're going to go ahead and build, and I will skip forward the board a little bit so you can see some of the other actions. So here we are, we've just finished action 1 and now we're into action 2. You can see that green has chosen to industrialize. We already showed that they built out these extra industrial complexes. Purple actually chose the same and built 3 over here. In addition to the 3 they built, they could have actually placed a gate if they had wanted to. And that gate could have been placed up to 2 squares away. 3 if they had some advancements, so they could have placed a gate over to here or over to here, but there's no tiles for them to gate to. I guess I could have gated from here to here. That would allow them to move a little bit, or have influence in both areas, but there's really no reason to do that because there's no influence over here that they need. So they wouldn't have done that, but note that gates can be placed so that you can kind of have influence from one area to another without actually being adjacent to them. And that's going to increase your powers, which we'll discuss in a moment. Yellow chose to build military, and you'll see that the militaries stack. So there are actually 2 militaries on this right here. There are 2 militaries right here. That means they built 3 on their turn. Now, the reason you have to do this is you have to increase your range, because a 1-level military starts with a range of 0, which means that it can't even build on things that are adjacent to it. That's why I had to build an extra military level on top of this. It increases its power from 1 to 2, but it increases its range from 0 to 1, and that's printed on the tile. I then built into the center and built 2 here, giving this a range of 1 and a power of 2. The red player here also decided to build military, and they did something similar. They built a 2nd level here to increase their range to 1, but then they built on this tile and this tile, so they have a power of 1 on each of those, but a range of 0. Now we would go on to the second action phase, and each player would choose what they're going to do. I'm going to skip over a lot of the actions here, but I'm going to show you one kind of example of the attack that you can do in a game. So let's say that green has chosen Assault. This is the 1 card. They're going to go first. And they're going to try and do a yellow on red assault, which is called a liquidation. They have a cost here of a movement. There is no movement here because they're not moving anything. Movement only happens if you're moving an agent or if you're moving a fleet. So that's going to be the ships or the little guys that you can move around. The ships are going to be additional military power when you have them. The guys are going to be the way of primarily conducting your political attacks. So you have liquidate here, yellow on red. And so he's going to carry this attack out. He's the arbiter, he's going first. He's going to attack from this tile to that tile. Now, this is where you need to know how to calculate power. For example, how do you calculate industrial power? Well, the industrial power, the base of an attack is always 1. It's printed on these tiles, it's a little starburst, it's in a 1. And you kind of add these together based on range. The range of industrials is always 1, so you're going to count all of them that are within range. This one has a 1, 2, 3. So this one's in range, this one's clearly on the same tile, and this one is 1 away, gives it a power of 3. We then look at the military power, and the military power works similarly. The range of this is 0, so it does not have any support on its own, but it also counts the power of anything that has range to it. So for example, this has a range of 1, which does have range to our power 0, or range 0, 1 here. So we have 1, 2, because it's too high, 3 for military power. Now that we've calculated this, we know that it's 3 on 3 essentially at this moment. Each player will be able to play one of their tech cards that they still have in hand for its military power here at the bottom. So you'll see that this one is a military of 7. We'll say that the green player plays that. And we'll say that the red player plays this card right here out as their choice for their card. Once this is done, we would reveal both of them. And we're going to go ahead and take a look, and we'll see, oh, well, this player played a 7, that makes their total 10, while this player played a 5, which makes their total 8. In this case, green is going to, of course, excel over red. And what's going to happen is this is going to be removed. It's going to go back to its player's board. Their income will go down. However, the amount of money they can retain may go up. And, of course, the cost to build their next military will be cheaper, or at least the same. So this will get removed, and the player simply kind of blew them out of that tile, which is good for control of areas. Now, there are different types of combat that can happen. As I said, you have blue combat. Now, political combat is going to work differently. The power of politics is always based on these little agents that you're going to want to build. These agents are going to move around the board. And you can move them by paying costs. They have costs to move across these red lines, and the more red lines you move across, the more it's going to cost you. So you kind of want to be careful how far you move them, but note that you can move most places by only crossing a couple of red lines. When you get them somewhere, you can use them to attack, and they are going to have the power of all of your political complexes that are on a specific color of tile. So for example, if they're on this color of tile right here, you could choose orange as your choice. And you're going to look at how many orange you have and how much that's going to give you in terms of a bonus. So the more of the same type of tile you have, you can choose that to use for an attack, and the stronger your guys will be. Now you could choose to attack that on your military, on somebody else's military, or on somebody else's industry. But note that building yourself in a specific way, having these militaries that are close to other militaries and have range to reach other militaries is going to be super important, because the more you can reach, the better they're going to be. For the industrials, you're going to want to have gates that allow you to have more adjacencies. So you want them to be close to one another, but you also want to have gates that can be far away that allow you to add more to your adjacency for those. For the politics, it's all about getting the right color tiles and, of course, advancing yourself in a way that's going to make that beneficial to you. But essentially, you're going to continue on in this way, taking 3 actions per round and then going to arbitration. After arbitration, or during arbitration, you're going to go through several steps. The first step of arbitration is that you are going to choose a new arbiter. This is going to be based on whoever has the most money left after 3 action phases. So whoever has the most money is going to get the arbiter token. At that point, everyone has to discard down to their retention limit. So if you can only retain 5 money and you have 8, you have to discard 3 money to get down to that retention limit. You can keep a lot in order to get arbiter, but of course you're going to have to discard it before you can use it. After that, you're going to score all of the different galaxy boards in the game. So let's just say this is the final scenario. People took a bunch of money and they didn't place a lot of stuff on the board. You're going to score each one of these galaxy boards and you're going to score them individually. First, you're going to get points based on whoever has the most presence on a board. So you're going to look at the overall power. This person's overall power here is 1 plus 2 is 3. Well, they're the only person on that board, so that doesn't really matter, and they're going to score the points for that. That sole presence is going to be worth 6 points for first place, plus they get bonus points for being the only person there, which is going to be an additional 2 points for being exclusive. So that's worth 8 points on its own. The same thing is going to be true for red's home area, and green's home area, and purple's home area. So eventually you're going to want to try and build into somebody's home sector in order to take some of those points away. The center board here is going to score differently, slightly. Basically, you're going to have to check the power of everybody here. So green has a power of 2. We'll see that red only has a power of 1, and yellow also has a power of 2. So we have a 2-way tie there. Purple is completely left out of this. So you're going to score based on this. You're kind of going to split points between the 2 players that are in first. You're going to get half the points each, essentially. But you're going to get a bonus point for being in the center galaxy board and having that control. So it would be worth about 4 points. I think that's the correct calculation for being in the center and having a tie between green and yellow, and they'd each get those points. Second place on any of these sectors would go to the next lower player. So you'd get 3 points for that if you're second, and an additional point, of course, if you are on the center board. So if there's a clear first and second place will get second place points plus 1. In addition, at the end of the game, you're going to get some extra points for each tier of your advanced tech you have. But basically, this is how scoring is going to work. You're going to go ahead, you're going to figure out who has the majority on each board, give them the 6 points. Whoever has second on the board will get 3 points. And whoever has, of course, majorities in the center will get a few extra points for controlling that area, because it's the area of major conflict. After you finish that, you're going to move on to the next collection phase. So you're going to kind of reset, everybody's going to get their income. You'll then go through another expansion, adding more tiles to the board, and continue on with actions 1, 2, and 3, building up your own areas and trying to get majorities in different areas while trying to eliminate other people and keep them from expanding better than you do. Whoever best manages to do this over the game, which will last until this pile is out or until all of the sectors in this board are filled, will be the winner. And there you have it. That is Hegemonic from Minion Games, a game that does often get compared to Eclipse because of the similar theme and the 4X gameplay. But when you really get down to it, the 2 games I don't really think could be a whole lot more different. One game, Eclipse, is all about building up your ships, trying to get your ships to be more powerful, and utilizing those ships to establish your presence out in the galaxy by blowing up aliens and fighting other people and scoring victory points in that way. Whereas this game is more about building up your buildings. There's not so much of the, advancing the abilities of your ships. You don't get better guns, you don't get stuff like that. But you need to position your buildings so that they can play off of one another, or position your ships so that they can play off of your buildings so that you can get more power in order to attack something. The idea that sometimes you can use one power to attack another power, whereas sometimes you're using industrial to attack an industry, is interesting. And the fact that you can sometimes eliminate a player and sometimes replace the player is another important thing to keep in mind in this game, although replacing players costs a lot more money. I know I didn't cover all of the intricacies of this game because it's far too much to cover in one game, or in one video, but the game plays out a lot more abstract, basically, than Eclipse does. It's more like positioning yourself in a tile-laying game than it is like building up a space empire and blasting people out of the sky with your lasers. This makes it a little bit harder to visualize when you're playing the game. It's a lot more abstract. You're trying to constantly keep track of what the power of all of your different things is, and each thing calculates power in a different way. So the first time through the game, you're going to have an immensely hard time keeping track of everything, and it's really important, I think, to be taught this game by somebody else. Have someone who's there there, even though you may have read the rulebook, somebody who's there who's played it before, who knows how to calculate power, teach you the game. If you can't do that, read over the rulebook several times, and I think maybe you'll have a grasp, but the first time through you're still going to stumble over it quite a bit. With that said, if you're a fan of Eclipse, that doesn't necessarily mean you'll be a fan of this. If you like abstracts and you like calculation, I think you'll like it. I'm a big fan of this one. Andrea, not so much so, just because of the constant recalculation of things, I think. So, if that sounds good to you, check it out. That is Hegemonic from Minion Games. I also definitely suggest getting the nice, fancy, futuristic metal coin tokens. They feel awesome. I love them for this game, and I'm going to use them in a lot of them, so check those out as well.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.